Hello, I'm Brian Bowles, Senior Director of Development and Alumni Relations at Johns Hopkins Center for Talented Youth, also known as CTY, and host for this evening's Bright Now Speaker Series. It is my pleasure to turn it over to our Executive Director, Dr. Amy Shelton, who will introduce our special guests. Amy?
So good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us tonight. It's my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Eve Rosenbaum. Eve fell in love with baseball at a young age, but she never imagined that her passion for the sport could chart a path for women to land leading roles in Major League Baseball. A native of Maryland, Eve currently serves as the Assistant General Manager of the Baltimore Orioles, go O's. The role oversees roster management, transactions, financial planning, and Major League operations and administration. Prior to joining the Orioles, Eve spent 5 seasons in the Houston Astros organization, most recently serving as the club's manager of international scouting. She also worked for the National Football League from 2012 to 2015 as a junior rotational program member and as manager of business intelligence and optimization. Eve attended Harvard and played as catcher on the university's Crimson varsity softball team. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology with a minor in philosophy and has participated in 7 on-campus programs at CTY. Now, please welcome Eve Rosenbaum and Brian Bowles.
Thank you, Amy. Welcome and thank you, Eve. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So first, how was your Thanksgiving? Kind of coming off of it's a holiday, but how was that time for you?
Yeah, it was nice. It was really maybe the first break I've gotten all year just because the baseball season was so crazy. So I definitely slept a lot.
No, definitely. So I want to get started with a couple of questions, but I guess first, why did you or when did you decide you wanted to pursue a career in professional sports?
Yeah, it was probably in college when that idea really started to cement itself. Obviously, I think like most people in high school, I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do. I knew I liked sports and I played a lot of sports, but I didn't really, think about it much beyond that. And then in college, I was playing softball, like Amy mentioned on the Harvard softball team. And I was at Harvard, where you're a part of the Boston community and people were just rabid fans of the Red Sox and all the other Boston sports teams. And that's when it really struck me, I could do this as a career and get to continue working in the game that I love and also get to help shape this community that loves their team so much, whether that's in Boston or any other community like Baltimore, which is also a huge sports town.
So I have to ask, what is it like working for your home team?
It's very cool. Yeah, I walk around the stadium, which is now my office, and I have all these memories that come flooding back to me from being, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, going to that stadium, and it feels very much like home.
Oh, definitely. So, I know there's importance of kind of examples or role models or just folks that we look up to growing up. And is there a coach or athlete you looked up to as a role model, kind of coming up at a young age and loving the game of baseball?
Yeah, so I actually grew up not alongside, but at the same time as the U.S. women's soccer team that's known as the 99ers, Mia Hanna, Brandy Chastain, and everyone. So that's like really the team that I remember loving the most and looking up to the most. Still at my parents' place down in Bethesda, down by DC.
Mm-hmm.
They still have my posters up from that soccer team from 1999. So that's really the team that I, like a lot of women my age, look back on and say like, wow, that really brought women's sports to the forefront. Besides that, my high school coaches were big influences. My softball coach, her name is Mrs. O'Donoghue, and her husband's Carl. They were our softball coaches. And then the JV coach, who's also my U.S. history teacher, his name is Mr. Kanan. They always encouraged me, to not only be the best student I could be, but also the best athlete I could be. And I stayed in touch with my softball coach, and then Mr. Kana he definitely encouraged me to start looking for jobs in sports.
Nice. So I'm going to do a little shift to kind of CTY, and I remember when we first met and we were at the ballpark, we had a chance to talk a lot about baseball, but then we started to get into kind of CTY and your love or affinity to CTY. But kind of why did your parents choose CTY?
Yeah, so growing up in Maryland, it was really easy to get there for their CTY's commuter camps or day camps. So my older brother, I have a twin brother, and my twin brother and I both did CTY, and before us, our older brother had done CTY. He's 7 years older than we are, so our parents were very familiar with the CTY program. And they knew that it had been really good for him, and he's brilliant. He's a lawyer now, so they know that he really enjoyed it. And then for my brother and I, we were also on a swim and dive team over the summer. So we had practice in the morning and practice in the afternoons. And so we couldn't do sleepaway camp like a lot of other kids do. So we started doing our parents encouraged us to, and then we were both good students, so we ran with it. They encouraged us to go to CTY and further our education. So we started doing that, I believe, in 3rd grade, maybe 5th grade, somewhere around there. So it was really our parents that pushed us to do it, and then it was so convenient being here in Maryland, and we both were very focused on academics from a young age, so it all worked out.
Definitely. And that's your twin brother, right, Elliot?
Yes, Elliot. Mm-hmm.
So he actually gave me a question to ask you.
Oh my gosh.
And said, did you like your time better at CTY when he was in class with you, or did you like it when you were separated?
Oh yeah, you know what? I think we took all of our classes together except one. Elliot, if you're watching, you can correct me. So we took 2 years of individually paced math sequence, and then we took 1 year of called reasoning, logic, and formal proof. And then at our last year in the computer program, that's when we took separate classes. I took one called Examining the Evidence, which was basically forensic science. That was before it got really big with CSI and Dexter and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was so cool. And then he took something else, which I don't remember. And then when we did the 3 years of the sleepaway camp, we also took the same classes. We did oceanography, existentialism, and then a class called human nature and technology. So Elliot, I think we took them all together. So and they were all awesome. Everything was great about it. Yeah. So
and I'll get to this at one point, but so Elliot's actually doing something pretty cool as well. Is that could you share a little bit with who's also a CTYer and your brother's a CTYer? So I said your parents must be very proud. But what's Elliot doing?
Yeah, so Elliot is an Imagineer for Disney. So he lives out in Hollywood and he works out for them in their West Coast studios as opposed to down in Florida. So the Imagineers, for those of you who don't know, are the people who design Disneyland. So he, runs a team that gets assigned these top secret projects about new roller coasters to build, or new rides to build, or even new lands to build. So I know right now he's working on updating Toontown in Disneyland. And before that, he was also in charge of turning the Tower of Terror into the new theme that it has, which is the Guardians of the Galaxy theme. And now he's working on some other top secret project. It's like state secret. It's like you can't talk about it because everyone wants to know what Disney is doing all the time, and it's out of on Twitter and blogs and everything. So that's pretty cool. So he gets occasionally gets free tickets to Disney. So he and I have gone to Disney a bunch together, which has been really fun.
Nice. And do you, in exchange, if he needs some baseball tickets, is he able to hit you up?
Yeah, I can help him out with that. It's always easier to get tickets when we're the team playing. If we're not the team playing, sometimes that's a lot harder.
So you mentioned the various classes you took at CTY, courses you took at CTY. Was there a favorite that comes to mind at CTY, or even outside of CTY, but kind of starting with CTY, just the most memorable one?
Yeah, that is a really good question. So existentialism was probably my favorite class, which is taught at Carlisle. And at least when I was going, it was like the primo class at Carlisle. So my brother and I took it our last year there. And I think it was one of those classes that gave preference to older students. And we had a great professor or teacher. I remember all of this, even though it was like 15 years ago. Her name was Maureen. And then we had a TA who her name was Olivia. So I loved the class. Like, who would have ever thought, you're in 10th grade and you're absolutely loving philosophy. I loved it. And I still have some of the books from that class. I still remember a lot of what I read in that class. It actually helped inspire me to be a philosophy minor in school. I majored in psychology and got a minor in philosophy. And I actually took a lot of classes that sort of overlapped, sort of like the philosophy of mind, partly because that's where, what the path of existentialism took me down. I retook existentialism in school, partly because I knew it would be easy because I'd read a lot of it before. But our TA, her name was Olivia, and she turned up in one of my philosophy classes at Harvard. It was a joint, undergrad and graduate offering, and she was getting her PhD, I think, in philosophy at Harvard or something. And I remember looking back at her in class and being like, Olivia? It was just the funniest. But I mean, taking a class in Hawaii was obviously super cool. I remember every Wednesday we got to go to the beach to study something. I mean, we were studying. We're also a group of kids at the beach in Hawaii, so that was just so cool. And then like I mentioned, examining the evidence. I remember they taught us about blood splatter patterns, which then got popularized in Dexter. It's you see a bunch of blood somewhere on the wall and you study how it's laid out, and that can tell you, where the murder happened, what the murder weapon was, and all these things. And I learned about it in camp. So Elliot always talks about this. We had our 7th grade science fair or 8th grade science fair or something like that, and Elliot and one of our friends who we're still friends with today did this big project about sand levels and wind, and got help from her dad, who was a statistics professor. And they did this really in-depth project, and I stood on top of a step ladder, literally in my pajamas, and dropped red food coloring to make it look like blood, and wrote some stuff up about what the patterns were telling me, and then I won the science fair. So he's still really resentful of that. But I only knew about that because I learned about it in CTY. Now everyone knows about it because of Dexter and CSI and all that.
Yes. So let me switch gears a little bit and go back to baseball. What's the most exciting part about your role with the Orioles?
It's being able to build a team from the ground up that you can see people starting to rally around. So when my boss and our other AGM, Sig, who runs our analytics department, when we all came to the Orioles, they came over in 2018. I was a year later in 2019. The team was not in the best of shapes. We were losing 100 games a year. We didn't really have a good farm system. Our major league team was stretched thin. The previous regime hadn't made good investments. So we kind of had to start over. We had to start over on the field. We had to start over in the front office as well by hiring a ton of new people who were more forward thinking and more progressive in their thinking in terms of using analytics, and more attuned to the sabermetric revolution, and coaches who were much more innovative in their teaching methodologies, understanding new scouting directors and everything like that. And it was a lot of work. And then this past season, we had our first winning season since 2016, I believe, and we were actually the first team out of the playoffs in the American League. And we were the story of baseball, and just all over the city of Baltimore, people started putting up Orioles gear and wearing the Orioles hats. And the games were super fun because we had a lot of close games that we won very late in the 9th inning, or even later in extra innings. And that was just really, really fun. Just getting to see, this work that I've been doing so diligently and kind of quietly for a few years is paying dividends on the field.
Oh, wonderful. Absolutely. Being able to be at the ground floor of kind of building something can be very special. So what characteristics or skills should an individual who works in sports, or even just in baseball, have? What are some of the kind of traits, if you will, or skill set?
Yeah, one thing you have to work in baseball and to work in sports in general, really like any industry that's demanding, is you have to be willing to put in the time and the effort. So there is simple supply and demand. There are a ton of people who want this job. Same thing, there are a ton of people who want to work for Disney. There's not nearly enough openings. So you have to really love it and be willing to work super hard to make sure that you have earned that spot and that you're not gonna get replaced. Because if you were to leave or not do well, there's a million people who would take your job for free, essentially.
Yep.
So you have to really love it to be able to put in the hours that it demands. And you have to, be willing to stay up late and work weekends, and when it's the trade deadline or the draft, you have to be willing to work. I'm not even joking, like 110, 120 hours a week. Sometimes, like there are days when I leave the ballpark at 1 in the morning, we're back the next day at like 10. So you have to really love it. And then the other trait that has really gotten me far in my career, and I definitely mention it to anyone who's trying to get in sports, is you just have to have the ability to get things done. And it can be really hard to identify who has that or who doesn't. But when you find someone who has it, you just know, hey, I can ask that person to do anything, and I know that they're going to figure it out. And as a manager, it's just so useful to have someone like that. So I've been that to my boss, who's our general manager. He just, anything he doesn't want to do, he just tells me to do it, and I just have to figure it out. I've been doing that really my whole career. And then when I find someone who I can trust, and I can say, hey, this project is really tedious, but can you do it? Or, hey, I don't know how to do this, but someone else is asking me, can you figure it out? And just having someone who goes, yes, I'll figure it out. And then they ask you questions, but only when the questions are productive and they've already tried something themselves and they can't get it to work and they want your advice for it, as opposed to someone who's, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? What should I do here? So when I find someone like that, it's just such a big sigh of relief.
Definitely. So tell me, what does it mean? Let's talk to me about what it means to be a woman in baseball and be considered a trailblazer.
Yeah. So, on the one hand, I don't really think about it that much because I'm just so focused on making the team better. And my entire career, and even before that, my entire upbringing, there were a lot of times when I was the only woman in the room. And as a kid, I actually played baseball and soccer with my brother Elliot. So I was playing on the boys team. And so I guess I knew I was the only girl out there, or not always the only girl, but one of a few. But I just, wanted to be the best I possibly could be at sports. And honestly, for a long time, I was better than the boys at both soccer and baseball. So that was kind of all I focused on. I was like, I just want to be better than you guys, and I am. It's only, now that I'm further along in my career that I can kind of step back and go, oh, what I'm doing is really cool. And there might be people who look up to me. Because for so long, I was just, I put my head down, do the work, get things done, like I was saying before. And the work will speak for itself, and my passion and my devotion will speak for itself. And it's true, it helps get me here. And so now I can kind of take a step back and go, like, oh, this is really cool. Sometimes I have older women come up to me and they say, I still remember when women weren't allowed in locker rooms. So just to see you as the AGM up here answering questions or talking to the manager or doing interviews, like they're like, I can't even believe it, that I never would have thought this day would come. So that's really cool to hear the perspective like that.
And I guess in the younger generation, you're seeing more women getting into baseball at a younger age. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, baseball conference, and a buddy of mine, Tyrone Brooks, runs a diversity and pipeline program, and there were a number of women in the room, younger women in the room that were aspiring to get into baseball, break into baseball, be the next Eve. But are you seeing some of that? Or are you having some of those conversations as well?
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's a few different reasons why that's possible. One is because a lot of the work that Tyrone is doing, I'm sure he'll say this too, it's sort of like a two-headed monster for getting more women into sports and more diversity in sports in general, which is one, you have to create a pathway for them to get into that industry. And part of that is even just letting people know these jobs exist. These are the qualifications you should have. This is what you maybe want to major in, or some classes you want to take in college, or if you already are out of college, here's kind of how you want to think. You want to even let people know that they exist. And then once they do get hired, you want to make sure that they're equipped to succeed in their current role, because sometimes women might be coming into the front office and they're surrounded by all these former players and they don't have playing experience, or it's kind of like the all boys club and maybe the guys are all talking and the woman kind of feels sometimes like she can't ask them a question. And so you want to make sure that she or anyone has the resources that they need to succeed, that they have mentors who they can talk to, that they, for me, when I first got this job at the Orioles, MLB actually said to me, like, hey, we really want to see you succeed. Do you want to take the train up for the day and we'll sit down and introduce you to a bunch of people and help you learn some of the ins and outs of the rules and the transactions, because there's 500, 600 pages of rules. And I said, yeah, that would be awesome. And then they said, use us as a resource. Feel free to reach out, because their goal is to make sure that the teams make the right decisions. And so, they didn't care that if I was a man or a woman or whatever, but they took the initiative to invite me up there to make sure that I had those resources when I didn't know the answer to a question, that I would be able to find it. So there's it's getting people in the door, and it's giving women and minorities the resources that they need to succeed once they get there. So that's sort of like the two-headed monster. And then another way that more women are getting involved right now is because there are pathways into the game that really never used to exist. One of those through analytics. So every team has a research and development department. Every team has their own internal software. And then we rely a ton on modeling and projections and forecasting to help us figure out our roster and figure out which trades to make and what does this guy need to work on while he's in the minors. And of course, as has been documented by Moneyball, that wasn't really part of the game until 15, 20 years ago. And it's still picking up steam now. So Sig, our other AGM, who is in charge of analytics, I think he's always said there's 50% women in the world, or 51%. So there's going to be women who are good at analytics, so we can hire women just as we can hire men to be analysts and developers. He just says it wouldn't make sense to just not look at 50% of the population when you're doing your hiring. So analytics is a pathway into the game that never used to exist. And then with coaching, for a long time, coaches were really only former players, but now teams are looking for coaches who have innovative drills, and they can challenge their players, and they can look at technology, and they can incorporate what the technology and the data is telling them into what they're seeing with their own eyes. So it's this broader skill set of coaches that are being hired that have ever been hired before, and a lot of times it's trending younger, because we're not just looking at former players, we're looking at people who coach high school, who coach college, who teach lessons on the side in addition to their other full-time job, but they're constantly on Instagram or Twitter talking about what they've learned that day in terms of hitting philosophy or pitching philosophy. And there are a lot of women who, whether there's former softball players like I am or not, they have gotten involved in the coaching realm like that, and then they get noticed by teams and then they get hired as well.
Wow. So thinking about that and just your journey, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned throughout your career?
Yeah, that is a good question. One thing that I have learned and am continuing to learn, every day is, what it takes to be a manager and a leader, and what you really need from your people. So, when I started out, when I was at the NFL, it was my first job out of college, so it was entry level. And then when I was starting out in baseball, I was a coordinator, which there's several levels above coordinator. up to manager, director, assistant general manager, and so on. I was just, working all the time. You're doing a lot of the grunt work, right? You're doing a lot of the day-to-day work that everyone has to do when they start out. And I remember, sometimes being like, I had my boss respond to my email, or like, why were they really short with me in the hallway? Or like, I haven't seen them, what are they working on? And you feel like you're the one doing all the work. And what is this other person, possibly doing? Because I'm doing all the work. And then when you get into those positions, you realize like, oh my God, there is just as much work. Because I've done all the little things before, I understand that. So I understand now what my employees and what are our more junior members of our front office, I understand what they're working on, so I can help them. But what a lot of my job now is a lot of managing people. I spend a ton of time on the phone, with MLB, just consulting them about rules, a ton of time on the phone with agents, because the agents are always trying to advocate for their players. And I'm negotiating with them, or I'm just answering their questions, or I'm helping them, arrange for a player to, get his surgery done at a more comfortable location or something like that. We have these players who are making millions and millions of dollars, and their agents represent them. And so I have to have a cordial relationship with their agents. That's very important. So I spent a ton of time on the phone, a ton of time in meetings, just running processes. So, yesterday I was literally in meetings the entire day. We had a meeting with our hitting coaches at first to talk about our hitting philosophy that we're going to implement more of next year. Then we had a meeting with some of our scouts to talk about some trades we might want to do. And then I had a meeting with our advanced staff to talk about advanced scouting, are the scouts who scout the team we're about to play. So they scout the Red Sox or the Yankees, and then they write up, strategy reports for our coaches. And so every year I help lead a process where we go through the reports and we say, do people like this? Do people not like this? Should we change this? Should we delete this? So I'm just meetings all day. I'm not the one really contributing. I'm not the one presenting, but I'm asking questions and I'm, connecting people into other people in the organization who they should talk to. And so you realize wow, there's an awful lot that managers are doing that isn't just, sitting at your computer in front of a spreadsheet all day, pounding away for hours at a time. So I'm still learning that. I'm still learning what I need to delegate things to people, because it used to be something where I was like, oh, I can do this. I'll just knock it out. It might take me 4 hours, but I'll knock it out. Now I go, I don't have time. So I have this email from the CFO, and I have an agent who's waiting for me to call them back. A manager's texting me, and I have to deal with that to help them make these high level decisions. And I need to delegate the other tasks to someone else.
So speaking of on that, and just thinking about all of what that work entails, and I know a lot of our students, CTYers, have this passion and love for learning, but there's also kind of a element of adversity and managing and dealing with adversity or challenges. How do you deal with adversity? Kind of what, or any words of advice, even the parents or even young people we have on the line, but just how do you deal with that adversity and kind of mental fortitude that comes with the challenges?
Yeah, baseball is actually a good answer to this, because it's well known. There's a well-known phrase at this point, I think, but in baseball, you measure your batting average, which is just how many times do you get a hit compared to how many times do you have an at-bat. And if you have a batting average of 270, that's good. If you have a batting average of 300, or yes, if it's 270, it's good. If it's 300, it's really good. It's excellent. Now that's 27% and 30%. So if you're getting a hit 30% of the time, that's excellent. That's going to help you win the MVP award. So I always have to think about that. And obviously I'm not out there playing, but from my perspective as a scout, when you're writing up your evaluation of a player, or you're predicting which player is going to hit and which player is going to fail, or you're recommending who should start the game as the pitcher versus get cut and you're go down to AAA. A lot of times you're gonna be wrong. It's just the nature of the game. Looking at players 1 year and you're predicting how good they're gonna be several years in the future. And we have all these numbers to help point us in the right direction. But at the end of the day, they're still humans and they have to go out there and do that. So you can choose to really beat yourself up because you messed up, or you can choose to say, everyone's getting me wrong. I'm gonna look at this. I'm gonna say, did I misevaluate? Was there something I got wrong about the evaluation? Or was it just I made the best decision, the best projection I could at the time with the information that I had, and then something happens, maybe the player got hurt. Maybe he all of a sudden, this happens sometimes, or had trouble throwing the ball across the field. Maybe he just went into a big slump and his mechanics were off and he just never got out of that slump. And in that case, you say, you know what? I'm sticking to my guns. I think I still made the right projection at the time, but I just got it wrong. It happens. So you always have to admit that you're gonna be wrong sometimes. And it's sometimes people double down on their decision and they don't like to admit that they were wrong. Or if they like to play a year ago and then he comes around again, they're like, oh, I still like this guy. And sort of ignore, information that maybe says you're not actually that good. You're just doubling down. You just have to say, you know what? I can change my opinion. I can get new information and change, because I was wrong last time. You really have to be able to pony up and say that sometimes.
No, absolutely. And just the diversity of baseball, as you mentioned, like the batting average, one thing I always note is like in baseball, you can essentially do hitting. You can do everything right and still technically fail, right? You can hit the hardest ball you've ever hit in your life and somebody catches it, right? And in the books, it shows up as an out, right?
Yeah.
So switching gears a bit, and don't laugh at this question, but what are your hobbies or interests outside of sports?
Yeah, so people have been, whenever I do a talk like this, people always ask me, and at the end of, I'm so glad I actually asked, because at the end of them, I'm always like, wait a minute, like I forgot to say music and going to concerts. I forgot that I'm a music fan all of a sudden. But no, yeah, and I've always loved listening to music. I love going to concerts. I had stopped going to concerts a little bit because of the pandemic, but now I'm back into it. I just saw Guster last week, which is a band. They have their own little cult following. I've been following them 20 years actually. So I saw them. I saw Alanis Morissette in Austin last summer, she was celebrating the 30th anniversary of this album called Jagged Little Pill. I've been to Coachella a few times. I'm a huge U2 fan.
Okay.
Huge U2 fan. Yeah, I've seen them 10 times. And I've already said whenever they go on tour next, I'm going to see them 3 times minimum. So I'm a huge music fan. Always listening to I listen to a lot of XM radio, trying to find new bands. So that's definitely a big thing. Right now I'm watching the World Cup. I could just watch soccer all day, every day. Some people think there's no action in soccer. I think there's constant action. So I love it. I like to read a lot. I read a ton of the New York Times. Right now I'm following all the drama with FTX and with Twitter. I just find it, fascinating. Just like, what are these people doing, basically? Just staying up to date with technology news in general, I think is really interesting. And then, everyone has their own shows that they watch. I got really into Star Wars during the pandemic. Like I was always a Star Wars fan, but then I got more into it. I watched some of their animated shows, which are on Disney Plus. And my friends and I did a Harry Potter book club on Zoom, and we did a Star Wars movie club on Zoom. So I got really into that. So I just finished watching Andor, and I'm like obsessed with it. I'm listening to all these podcasts about it. So that's how I fill my time. I'm not focused on baseball.
So is it, there's always a question around work-life balance and balancing those competing priorities. And I mean, just given the demands of your job, how do you manage, or just what does that look like for you? Work-life balance, does it exist? And even balancing those competing priorities?
Yeah, it's really hard. in baseball. Yeah, I think baseball is the hardest of all the sports because the season is really long. So my hotel reservation for spring training starts on February 13th. And then if we get into the playoffs, and hopefully we do what the Astros and the Phillies did this year and get to the World Series, that goes until basically November 1st. And then in November, we have a set of meetings called the GM meetings, where we get together with all the other teams and we kind of reflect on the year, and MLB makes announcements. We start meeting with agents. And then we have another set of meetings in December called the winter meetings, where it's like a bigger group. We all get together and it's a good chance to network, and agents make presentations about their players, and MLB gets our feedback on things. And then it's Christmas, and then it's January, and then I'm back to Florida for spring training. So you really have like almost no downtime. There's almost no off season. And even when it is the off season, like right now, we're working on trades. We're trying to move free agents. We're having meetings with our coaches and our players to get ready for next year. So it's really, really hard in baseball. And it's constantly something I'm working on. One thing I do try to remember is when it is the off season, like right now, like I don't have to be at the office until 8. Like I can come home at 6:30 or 7. That's okay. Especially because one thing that was great actually about the pandemic is, I have this nice home office now. I actually have 2 monitors here, and a nice standing desk. So if I have to do some work, I know I can do it at home, and at least at home I'm more comfortable. I can be wearing my pajamas and have music blasting all over the speakers and things like that. So just, being able to find time in the off season, just forcing yourself to have time is important. And then another thing actually that came out of the pandemic that was good is this having flexibility in where you work. My boss likes to have us there in person, which I actually don't mind because I get to work at the baseball stadium, which is really cool. It's only a 7-minute drive for me, so it's super easy. But it's inherent in baseball that people travel a lot. You're going to scout, so you're going to see players. You're going to our affiliates or our minor league team, so you're traveling around the road for that. You're traveling with the major league team. You're going to meet with an agent. We have meetings off-site. So I've gotten pretty good at being able to work while I'm on the road, and gotten pretty good at staying in touch with my boss while I'm on the road. And then fortunately, we decided that we were going to continue Fridays as a work from home day for everyone. So, because I'm used to working on the road and used to being away sometimes, and now we have this Friday work from home day, I know that's, hey, today's a Wednesday and I'm getting a mattress delivered, or I have a doctor's appointment. Okay, maybe today I won't be in the office and it'll be a little bit more for me time. But then on Friday, when it's a work from home day, I'm gonna be really keyed in and working. Or it's Saturday, okay, I can do a little bit of work today on a Saturday because I didn't do something previously, on a Wednesday because I was thinking more of an off day. So it's kind of like being fluid like that is one way that helps me keep my work-life balance somewhat sane, but it's never gonna be great in baseball.
No. So I've got one last question. Now I want to get a couple from the audience, but I had a chance to I got a note from your college coach, Coach Allard.
Did you reach out to people, or did they?
Well, I can't. It's top secret.
You can't. Okay.
But she said she talked about you. She said you were very strategic. Thinker as a baseball player. She said she's one of the most selfless players I've ever coached, and she understood the big picture and understands her role in making the team successful. So last question for you is kind of any advice you would give a young student that wants to pursue a career that's similar to yours.
Yeah. So it's very nice that coach, we call her coach, that coach said that. I know what she's hitting at, which is I was a walk-on to the softball team, so I wasn't recruited. I had to try out. And then when I made it onto the team, I wasn't very good compared to the girls who had been recruited. So I was mostly the bullpen catcher and then a pinch runner. So I wasn't out there playing every day, having all this glory. I was just sort of really helping my pitchers succeed. And then when I was pinch running, someone else had already gotten a hit and got it on base, and I was just a bit faster, so I was just carrying out the rest of their effort. So I was only on the team because I loved it, and because I was having fun, and I liked winning, and I liked the camaraderie. And I wanted to do whatever I possibly could to make the lives of my teammates easier so that they could then succeed, because I knew if they succeeded, I would succeed too, because we're all on the same team. Honestly, I find so often in the corporate world, or just anywhere, even in sports and football and baseball where I've worked, where you're part of a team, you're trying to help a team win. I'm just shocked how many people seem to just really be focused on themselves and pushing their ideas through, and not being willing to step back and say, you know what, you have the better idea. I'm going to support you on this. So that's one thing, which is you really, really do have to remember you're part of a team. You don't always have to have the ideas. Managers and bosses like also notice when you're good at collaborating and you're good at encouraging other people and you're good at giving other people a platform to speak. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. So, you know, always remember what it was like when you were playing sports as part of a team, and all you cared about at the end of the day was that you got to raise the trophy up. It didn't matter if you're a bench player or the star, you were still champion. So I always remember that. But then for people in general who want to get into the sports world, you know, I do think a lot of it starts with what your background is. A lot of jobs these days require you to have some sort of base technical skills or quantitative skills, which for a lot of students who go to CTY right now, I'm sure is not a problem at all. My nephew, who's in 3rd grade, maybe he's in 5th grade. Oh no, he's older than I thought. Yeah, well, he's 10. So I think that's 5th grade. He's like already learning code and Python, and so I'm like, okay, he's gonna be fine whenever he gets a job. So whether it's at CTY or in college or doing it via YouTube, learning, you know, Excel is great. Learning SQL, SQL database language is super helpful. Learning R and Python to do statistical analysis and being able to make pretty graphs and build models is super helpful. So doing whatever you can in your spare time or in school to learn those quantitative skills is definitely going to give you a good background to get into baseball. At the same time, if you're not a math person, you can't fake it. So you can't fake your way into being able to build a projection system for a baseball team if you hate it, and if you know you're honestly like not that good at it. You're probably not that good at it because you hate it. So you can't fake it. So it's okay to, I had to do this myself, say like, I have this base understanding. I've taken a statistics class. I know how to write some code, but you know what? Other people are way better at it than I am. So I'm not gonna fake it because that's not gonna be good for me or good for the team. I'm gonna do these other things. So always keep that in mind. And then for baseball in general, so I do a lot of hiring, and I see a lot of people who basically say, like, I'm a huge sports fan, I love baseball, please hire me. Everyone who's applying for a job in sports is a sports fan, shocker. So you have to do something to differentiate yourself. And what I like to look for are people who think strategically about the game. So the Orioles, we're making constant roster transactions. We're promoting people from the minors up to the majors. We're cutting people. We're making trades. It's not, I would say if you want to work in sports, it's not enough to just read the news and then have your fan opinion, like a lot of talking heads, you know, on various networks have. You should actually step back and think, why did they do this? You know, how is this to give them a leg up versus the Yankees or the Red Sox? What data can I see in this guy's stat line that might let me know why they did this? How does money play a factor here? What is this guy's arbitration earnings? What's he projected to make? What are other players around the league getting paid? Sort of like learn the narrative of the team and have your own analysis about what's going on, as opposed to being able to just say like, oh, that was a bad decision because that guy was good and they cut him. Actually step back and say, oh, well, they actually noticed that he was, you know, getting really unlucky or really lucky because he kept hitting the ball right at people. So being able to have your own opinion is really what's going to help you stand out in an interview process.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'm going to get a couple questions from the audience and before we close out, and then just one extra innings or extra credit question. But Eve, is a hot dog a sandwich?
Oh my gosh, it is not. It is a hot dog. I
All right,
love sandwiches. I also love hot dogs, and they're different. But I know it's controversial.
So question, what do you think, or who do you think is going to win the World Cup?
Oh, you know what? I think it's going to be France. I think they're going to repeat their first group match. I can't remember who they were playing, but I was watching it right here, working at home, and I had it up on my TV. And I was like, oh my God, I was like, they are so good. Just their footwork and their ability to pass the ball into space, using all these terms, pretending like I know what I'm talking about. But they clearly, to me, were the best team.
Outside of Camden Yards, what's your favorite Major League stadium?
I do love Fenway Park. I spent a year interning for the Red Sox when I was in college. And Fenway's the oldest stadium, and it's an unbelievable feeling to be there. So I recommend checking it out. But Camden, we just celebrated our 30th anniversary, and we were the first retro stadium. So we were the first stadium to sort of have like a throwback feel, and then everyone copied us. So it's a great stadium.
No, I've definitely seen that. On the baseball end, is there a good resource, book, video course for learning sports analytics?
Yeah, there are a lot of resources online these days. There is a class offered online through BU. The program's called edX or something like that. It's called Sabermetrics 101. It's like a pre-recorded course where they teach you partly about the history of the game, partly about stats, and then partly a little bit of R and SQL. So depending on where your skill set is, are you technical and you're trying to learn about stats? What does batting average and ERA and XOPS and everything mean? You can just fast forward through some videos and watch the stuff that interests you, or if you're me and you want to learn SQL more, you can fast forward through the history of baseball and watch those videos about SQL. So I recommend that. There's also, reading Moneyball is good. The best sort of like constantly updated resource is Fangraphs. That's where fans and professional writers just blog about the data of sports. So you have free time, just go through and just read articles, listen to podcasts, just pour over Fangraphs.
Do you think there will ever be a professional women's softball league?
So there have been professional women's softball leagues. There have been various ones throughout history, sort of like there have been various professional women's soccer leagues that have opened and folded and opened and folded. Now the one now is actually been around for a few years. It's just, unfortunately in women's sports, it's hard to get funding the way that men's sports can. Football and baseball and basketball, the men's leagues, they generate so much revenue from ticket sales and so much revenue from TV, from the TV contracts that these leagues have. And unfortunately, for various reasons, the women's game has been unable to get that much revenue. So that's why those leagues don't stick around as long as they should.
Next question is, did Eve ever feel like giving up soccer or baseball because she was the only girl?
You know what? No, never because I was the only girl. No, well, the only sports I ever stopped playing was because I didn't enjoy them. Everything else I just played it because I loved it.
Baseball question. Major League Baseball is instituting a lot of changes next year. What will be the most obvious change that fans will notice next year? More singles, fewer strikeouts, or no change?
Well, I think the biggest one that people will notice is the pitch clock, which is there's actually going to be a clock that counts down the time between each pitch, and the pitcher has to throw the pitch, before the clock goes off. So I think it's 17 seconds now between each pitch, and if the batter's not in the box ready to swing, it's going to be a ball, and if the pitcher's not ready to throw, if the batter's not in the box ready to swing, it'll be a strike on the batter, and if the pitcher's loitering around and not ready, it's an automatic ball. So I think fans will notice that. They hopefully will notice it in a good way, because in the minors last year, when MLB had this rule, it shaved 25 minutes off the length of a game, which is huge. If there's one reason why people don't bring their kids to as many games, because the game is over 10:30. Now, if the game's over at 9:45, 10, 10:15, more people will stay. So I think that will be something people will notice. In terms of how the actual run scoring environment will change, I don't know. You're probably going to see more singles because the shift has been banned now. So you'll see lefties being able to poke the ball through the right side of the infield more. So you'll probably see more singles. But the thing about baseball and how the ball changes every year, and every year the pitchers get better and throw harder, is, you don't really know. So that's why we play the games.
Do you ever think there will be a woman in Major League Baseball as a player?
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely wouldn't rule it out. I was just reading last week that there's a woman playing hardball baseball at Brown this upcoming season. And I always think back, I had this conversation with Charles Steinberg, who's a longtime Red Sox executive, and he's very big about promoting women in sports, particularly women players. And he said, if there's ever a woman who's going to make it in Major League Baseball, she's going to be a pitcher. I said, you know what? I agree with you. And I always think about this, like, what was my reasoning for that? And what was his reasoning? I can never quite narrow it down. But I was reading about this woman at Brown, I went, I bet she's a pitcher. Sure enough, she's a pitcher. So if there is ever going to be a woman who makes the majors, I think she'd probably be a pitcher.
Okay.
But honestly, I don't know. And part of it is because women have softball, which is sort of like our version of baseball. I obviously played softball, and I loved it. It is a more faster paced game than baseball. It does super well on TV during the Women's College World Series that ESPN has every May, because it's so fast paced. And in baseball, if you hit a ground ball in the infield, it's an out. The guys don't even run that hard at first base. And softball, every play is bang bang because the field is smaller. So some women say, like, hey, I hate that I have to go play softball. I just want to be able to continue to play baseball. More opportunities are opening up for them to play baseball. But honestly, if any girl or woman switches from baseball to softball, like, sure, I'm all for it. Softball is really fun. It's a good sport.
So last question, Eve. If you weren't in baseball, what would you be doing?
I would be a professional ice cream taster. Yeah. So that I do. Yeah, it's probably an even harder job to get than working in baseball. But before I got into baseball, I was working for the NFL. I was working for the league office, and I really liked my job there. I was doing analytics for their digital media arm. So people opening up their app, what are they looking at? What are they downloading? What videos are they sharing with friends? I was doing that set of analytics, which we were then using to make the app a better experience for customers, and then also it would generate revenue for our sponsors. I think I would probably still be doing something like that, whether it was at the NFL or whether it was at some sort of digital media company.
Nice. Well, Eve, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time, and it's an awesome conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian. Yeah, thanks for having me, everyone.
So just wanted to close out. I'd like to thank our Executive Director, Dr. Amy Shelton, for joining us tonight and introducing Eve. And most of all, we'd like to thank our attendees for participating and sending in your questions. I hope you enjoyed tonight's conversation as much as I did. We invite you to visit the CTY Facebook page, where events will be posted, as well as our upcoming events. And save the date for our next Bright Now speaker series with CTY alum, leader, coalition builder, and seasoned nonprofit executive Ben Jealous on Wednesday, January 18th at 8 p.m. In just a moment, we'll post information about the CTY YouTube page, where a recording of this webinar will be posted by week's end. We hope you see you soon. And thank you so much and have a fantastic and safe night. And thanks again, Eve.
Yeah, bye everyone.